happening, gang? Engineer Steve, always keeping it live and fun in the Truth Radio stations. Appreciate you, brother. Appreciate you for hanging out with us, Marshal Scarr, making us all smart and stuff on the life cycle of a business. And appreciate you for hanging out as well with us. We're getting our hands dirtied into the life cycle of a business. This is actually a really important conversation, very germane to, I know, a lot of the folks that are listening in on this station weekly, which is you own a business, but do you have enough structure in place, and do you even know where to begin with that to know if you do? So on the first segment with Marshal Scarr, we went through what the 3.5 entities are: LLC, S Corp, C Corp, limited partnerships, and how to make sure that you've got the right one for you to eliminate risk. If you missed that one, go catch us at thegreenhousegroupinc.com/Truth Radio for all of the previous segments. And then we got into making sure if there's an entrance and exit strategy and what are the movers and shakers that are germane to that part of the conversation. So let's cap this off. Let's bookend this, Marshall. What about when something goes wrong, right? And you might say someone gets hit by a bus or something, God forbid, right? And you have to handle the affairs. So let's talk estate administration.
Sure. Jesse, thank you. The reality is that, the two certainties in life, as they always say, are death and taxes. And
you master both.
Yeah. A quick story about a real life example is
there we go.
Worked on an estate a few years back of a woman who died in Newport Beach in her home up there.
Okay.
Drowned in her tub.
Oh.
40-some-year-old woman, completely unexpected. Probably bumped her head. They didn't figure out exactly what it was. Unfortunately, her son, hadn't been able to reach her. Came over to the house a couple of days later. He was 22 years old or so. Found his mom drowned in the bathtub.
Wow.
Not a pretty picture, but those kind of things happen. And so, that's part of what I was preaching before is be prepared, have your business organized and try to develop an exit strategy early. While that situation started out as an awful tragedy, it was actually a fairly easy estate to administer. She had not done a lot of pre-planning, didn't have a trust, so we had to go through a probate. Fortunately, her main source of income was a Budweiser beer distributorship, actually located out of state, and her sister ran the business day to day. So it was I'm guessing the size of the estate was 10 to 12 million, as I recall. This was probably 15 years ago. But it went really smoothly because her sister was a great businesswoman, had all the records organized. Unfortunately, they had lost their father just a few years before, so they had been through the process of having to get the business appraised for estate purposes and kind of had recently been down the road, so recreating it wasn't all that difficult for them. When you don't do advanced planning and you're not well organized, things don't always go that smoothly.
Yeah.
The basic process, whether you're in a probate or a trust administration setting, is you are collecting and identifying assets, you inventory them, you get them appraised and valued so you know where you stand for taxes, both as to whether there are estate taxes, which, as people may know, are now post-2012 are at $5,400,000 and some odd thousand now. It's indexed, so it changes every year. It used to be set for several years until Congress made a change. Now it actually is inflation adjusted.
Interesting.
But for business people, if you $5 million, if you own a home in California and you have a business, you may be looking at the estate tax risks more often than average people think. So getting back again to the process of an estate administration, you're valuing those assets for tax purposes, both as to whether there is an estate tax payable, and because your heirs are going to take a new basis in your property, and they need to know what that value is for that purpose. You pay final income taxes. You pay any income taxes accruing to the estate during its administration. You pay any creditors that are left behind. You report an account to the beneficiaries, and then you're able to do distribution. Typically, whether you're in a probate or an estate, you're looking at a year or so minimum, sometimes longer, depending on a variety of factors. In either setting, the heirs, your heirs, don't necessarily have access to the money you've left behind until, those basics are taken care of. The creditor's been paid, you've set aside money for taxes, you paid taxes. It isn't like your heirs are going to get instant access to cash. There is opportunity to do that. If you're in, say, a probate setting, you can petition the court to ask for permission to make an early distribution or to provide a family allowance. But the reality is, in San Diego, and it's even worse, I've heard recently, in Los Angeles, just to get a hearing on any kind of motion in the probate court, you're looking at 3 to 4 months' time from the time you file your papers till you can be heard in court. So, again, it gets back to the idea of advanced planning. There are ways to make cash available for people shortly after your death through life insurance and pay on death accounts, those kinds of things.
Right.
But all of that, again, takes advanced planning and forethought. I can give you kind of another example.
I love the examples. I find myself in the stories more than anything.
Yeah. Another example was one just a couple of years ago. What looked like a fairly small estate in La Jolla. Somebody had a small condo kind of away from the beach. It wasn't, $400,000 or $500,000 value. Had a little bit of debt on it. We thought it was a fairly simple thing to administer. And as we got into the estate, we realized that the decedent, he left no living relatives we could find. He had left actually 3 or 4 different wills, and there was actually a will contest in the case. So it wound up in the probate court. We actually went through some mediations to resolve the will contest.
But all wills end up in probate, do they not?
They all end up in probate, and probate is a court-supervised process of going through the kind of basic administration of collecting the assets, identifying them, value them, paying the debts and taxes. And
unless you think that that's totally a reasonable option or solution, the unfortunate part is that it's incredibly prohibitive to the estate because it's expensive.
It is more expensive than trust administration is. It's not wildly expensive. The fees for attorneys and executors are set by statute.
Right. Depending on how much the thing's worth. Right?
Yes. As the size of the estate grows, the compensation to the executor or the attorney is reduced on a percentage basis. So as the estate grows, they're taking a smaller and smaller percentage.
But the trust is way cheaper. That's the point.
The trust is cheaper after you're gone.
Right.
It's more expensive to set up front.
Well, right. No question about that. Yeah. Free versus what? A grand up. Starts at about $1,000 and can easily go way up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you're a business owner, you're looking at doing it right. You're looking at spending several $1,000s.
Right.
So I was talking about the estate in La Jolla.
Please.
So there was a will contest, which happens in the probate court. And before I forget, let me just sidetrack for 1 second about probate versus trust.
Yeah.
You need to think about 2 things when you're doing a will or a trust that people, I find, don't spend enough time really considering in advance, is who's going to administer for them when they're gone.
Right.
You have the choice of appointing people beforehand. If you don't, the court will appoint somebody. Typically, you don't want that to happen because then your heirs are dealing with people they don't know. But people tend to think of their, immediately of their children, if they have children, or another family member, and they really need to give some thought about whether that person is somebody who can handle the process well with some professional guidance. Are they the kind of person who's going to take professional advice, or are they going to try and do it themselves? While grieving. And the closer they are as a relative, the more grief is a huge factor that people really don't realize kind of how mentally numbing it is until they've been through it.
Yeah, well said.
And what probate gives you that a trust administration doesn't is kind of some adult supervision. It's a cumbersome supervision. It's it's an expensive one if there's disputes, although they can get expensive in a state because you wind up in court too if there's a big dispute. But people, I don't think, give enough consideration as to whether the person in their family that they want to choose to handle their affairs after they're gone is the kind of person who can do it well without court supervision.
So true.
And if you're in a trust setting and you have an heir, an executor, or a trustee who isn't treating the heirs properly, it's a big step for somebody to file a lawsuit to enforce that, but I've seen that happen more times than I'd like to have seen.
Care to admit?
So let me go back to the story about the small condo in La Jolla.
Yeah.
So as we were kind of trying to deal with the resolution of the various wills that the person had left behind and which one was accurate and current, and they were all handwritten, which made it more interesting, we found out that there were a few safety deposit boxes as we got bills in for those.
Ooh.
And there was literally a couple $100,000 in cash stuffed in safety deposit boxes. Completely unexpected. We also found that there was a pay-on-death account, which had been left to a friend who, it turned out, had predeceased him. It took us a long time to find out who the identity of that friend was. And it turned out that there was a little bit of dispute about whether that person was actually deceased because they were in a cryogenic freezing center in Arizona.
Come on.
No, I'm serious. These are the kind of things you just run into in real life that you wouldn't, if you were writing fiction, people would say, no, that's too crazy.
Yeah.
But, yeah. And the cryogenic center was designed to bring this person back to life. So there was, a little bit of debate about whether they were deceased or not.
In a few words, because we're running up on the next break here, what would you say the main lesson is to take away?
It's one of organizing your affairs, keeping good records, having professionals that your heirs can turn to help them straighten out your business arrangements. And if you have a business, plan early to deal with that, because in many businesses where it's really all about the main entrepreneur who started the thing, once they're gone, the value of that business is greatly reduced. And there's frequent business failure when that occurs, where there isn't planning on succession done early and done thoroughly.